Have you ever seen the film Orphan from 2009 and think it's creepy? Well, the movie is based on the true story of Barbora Skrlova, and reality is much more frightening. Our story begins with Klara Mauerova, a woman born in 1975, in the Czech Republic and who since childhood showed mental problems. She was a single mother with 2 children living in the Czech Republic. After separating from the father of her children, Klara became lonely and invited her sister Katerina to come and live with her. Klara met Barbora Skrlova when she was studying to become a teacher at university. Barbora approached Klara one day claiming to be a 12-year-old girl named Anika who had escaped from an abusive group home. Barbora Skrlova, a 33-year-old woman with a glandular disease that made her look like a 12-year-old girl. She decided to take advantage of her condition and she pretended to be a girl before different families. Klara took Barbora home and took care of her as if she was her own child. She planned to eventually adopt her. Barbora claimed to be very sick, needing lots of medical appointments, but she would only allow Klara's sister Katerina to take her to these appointments. It turns out that Katerina knew that Barbora was not what she claimed to be and was pretending to be Barbora's doctor, writing notes to Klara explaining Barbora's treatments. Klara had struggled with undiagnosed mental illness since she was a child, and Barbora took advantage of Klara's confused mental state. Barbora convinced Klara that her other children were the causes of all of her problems and convinced her to abuse them. Klara and her sister, so as not to lose Barbora's love, began to punish the 2 children in increasingly cruel ways. Barbora suggested to Klara to build a cage and lock up her 2 children. She accepted. The cage was installed in the basement and the 2 children were locked there in 2007. She decided to watch them in the cage through a baby monitor. For a whole year and on orders from Barbora, Klara and her sister tortured, beat, burned and left the children without food. The situation reached its climax when Barbora ordered to fatten the children and then cut a piece of meat and eat it in front of them. This abuse was uncovered when Barbora and Klara's neighbor had a baby and purchased the same brand of baby monitor. The signals got confused and the neighbors were shown images of the horrific scenes from next door. He discovered that the signal came from the house next door and warned the police, who were horrified to see the images. The women saw that the police were outside their house and tried to escape, but it was useless. Klara and her sister were arrested. The police entered the basement and what they saw left them breathless. There was a beaten girl hugging a bear and 2 children locked in the cage. The police rescued the children and comforted the girl, who did not stop crying. They went to take the declaration of the 2 women, and they confessed everything they did to the 2 little ones. 2. Asked a policeman. And when looking at the girl who was crying, she was no longer there. Barbora had fled. After fleeing the Czech Republic, Barbora Skrlova decided to continue her scam in Norway. She got liposuction and a breast reduction to become a more convincing child. She assumed the identity of Adam, a 12-year-old boy, and made her way to a home for homeless children in Oslo. From there she was adopted by a couple who enrolled her in the Marienlyst school. Barbora was able to fool teachers, support workers and police in Norway for several months before suspicion was raised that Adam was not what he seemed. Eventually Skrlova was exposed for who she was and arrested. She was extradited to the Czech Republic and sentenced to 12 years in prison. After just 5 years she was released from prison due to her mental health. Barbora Skrlova is now a free woman living in the Czech Republic. She keeps a low profile and has been out of the public eye since her release.